Now we'll look at project ownership versus project management. And this is going to be a little bit of a review from something we have seen earlier, but with a little bit of a different spin on it. So, importantly, we need to know the players that we're going to be working with and what their roles are. So let's define them. There's the project owner. This is the person who will sign off on the project moving forward. They control the checkbook. They're the ones who have the business result or the personal result that is most directly impacting them versus a project manager. A project manager is someone who will handle the tactical aspects of the progress of this project. But they may or may not, in fact, also be the project owner. They could be doing the work on behalf of the project owner. So the project owner would be someone who has to answer what they want to accomplish and why it is vital or important for it to be achieved. The project manager is someone who will work on the how it will be done. At times it could be the same person who performs both roles. Especially if you're coaching or consulting individuals, they may straddle both roles, and at times they'll work in their project owner capacity, and other times they may have to work as a project manager in engaging with you. So the project owner defines the project scope, the outcomes expected, and they're going to reinforce their commitment and the importance of this outcome being achieved to others if in fact there are others who are going to be part of this project. They are most focused, the project owner, on what it is they seek to gain. They are invested in the more positive outcome that you as the coach or consultant are being brought in to help them achieve. They're going to be very focused on solving problems. They're going to clear your path if you have to engage with others to make sure that they are on board. They make themselves available. That the project owner will be sure that you have the right resources at your disposal. They will have to navigate between balancing their own engagement with you as the coach consultant and the project, so that they're not micromanaging, but they remain very much involved by reinforcing the outcomes, by supporting the process, and by communicating to others the importance of moving forward. So as you think about who you need to please by the completion of your project, keep in mind it is the project owner. Even though you may not work with that person as frequently or as closely as you do with your project manager, it's the project owner who ultimately will determine if this project achieved the stated objectives. So, what are you to do then if you want to ensure that there is ownership by the project owner and commitment by the others who may be part of this project, either as project manager or as subject matter expert, people to provide perspective or opinions based on their expertise and experience or tenure with a company, or a whole host of other reasons why they are part of this project. Very important. Have a kickoff meeting. And if you're asking yourself, what do I include in my kickoff meeting? You want to have the objectives spelled out. Why is this project occurring? What do we hope to achieve or accomplish as a result of this project? Who's going to be involved? Who are the team members? And at what point do they become involved? And maybe at what point is their involvement no longer required? They have a phase of the project that they'll be contributing to, but they're not part of the entire project. Others may be a part of the project from start to finish with no respite in between when they're not included. Depending on the project, you'll have to identify the objectives, the team members, and what their roles are. What is it that they are expected to provide? Is it simply to make themselves available should you, as the coach consultant, have questions? Do they have a more formal role where they are to provide input through observation, interview, provide their archival data of how they've done things previously, whatever it may be? These are all things you'll have to determine so that people are involved, engaged, and committed. You'll have to be really clear on the outcomes. Answer what's in it for them. And what's in it for them, if there's more than one person, may differ. What the parents receive by way of a family intervention is very different potentially than what the children receive. Maybe the parents receive a sense of calmness and a greater confidence in how to raise children, and the children receive a less chaotic environment, a more structured place where they can play, do their schoolwork, engage with each other, etc. Determine the communication plans. We had addressed earlier how communication is to occur, who is authorized to communicate on behalf of the client organization. At your kickoff meeting, review that as well. Now, very importantly, you also want to identify any foreseeable roadblocks. Do a risk assessment up front and share what you perceive to be the roadblocks and how you will get around them. Invite those that attend this kickoff meeting to identify other roadblocks that maybe you were not aware of, or your project sponsor, your project owner did not share with you. Because if you're dealing with people who are perhaps more involved in the work to be done, they may be able to identify some of the project processes or procedures that may come in conflict with the way things are currently done, and they can identify, here's a potential roadblock, but here's a way we can go around it. Now you may be thinking, why do I need this kickoff meeting? After all, it's a fairly straightforward project. I already have the authorization to do the project. My project owner is somebody who is very clear on what he or she desires. They've committed to providing the right resources. Well, I'll share a phrase with you that may at first blush seem counterintuitive, but it has proven to be right time and time again. And that is, you need to go slow to go fast. What that means is take the necessary upfront time to sketch out the project, to scope out people's involvement, to identify those things that may cause an obstacle or to slow down forward progress, and develop plans B, C, and D as necessary should they arise, so that you're not having to make it up on the fly as you are confronted by things that, had you spent the time up front, you could have identified, potentially avoided, or at least when they are arising, you have a solution or more than one that you can employ. So please do some version, some variation of a kickoff meeting where you do review objectives, team members, the roles of those team members, the outcomes, how communication will be handled, and always address what's in it for them individually so that they can see the benefit of participating. Now, we had addressed a little earlier the notion of scope creep, and when you talk about working in a project format with a project manager versus the project owner, with the best of intentions, they may, upon occasion, look for ways to get work accomplished, and not because they're looking to steal your expertise. They're not necessarily looking to get something for nothing. They may not have been involved in the original contracting, and so it seems fairly self-evident or intuitive to them just to say, hey, you've got this skill, you have this expertise, would you mind also providing something else? And your project begins to expand like a mushroom fungus on lawns. It's not going to be something that is easily controlled unless you are prepared for when it does happen and you have a ready-made response. So let's look at some of the potentials that you may confront. As long as you're surveying about topic X, would you mind adding some additional questions that may not be necessarily on the topic, but hey, it's the same population we need to ask these other questions of, so you wouldn't really mind, and we can just append your survey with these additional 2, 5, 20 questions. Well, at first blush, you may think, well, actually, no skin off my nose. Sure, we can do that. But be aware that it can grow and it may not be something that you think is appropriate to the project. Another one might be, since you're already interviewing these high-level executives, could you also interview somebody else? And again, you may feel that that's not at all an encroachment on the project, something you're willing to do, and you may concede that, okay, as long as I'm there, I can do that too, or we can add that person to the project. Another one might be, would you mind if I filled the back of the room with 3 new hires? As this would be something that they could really benefit from, it would be an excellent opportunity for them to hear your presentation. And again, you might be thinking, well, I'm already talking to the 15 or 20 people that we had initially agreed to. I don't speak any differently if there are 3 more people in the room. Your choice as to whether that somehow is something that you'll draw a line in the sand around or not. Or the last one, is it okay if you also address my spouse's questions as opposed to just simply mine, sort of coach both of us through our individual scenarios. Your choice as to how you wish to respond, but if you choose to respond in a way that you don't want to do it because you feel that this is additional work and not part of the original contract, you have to, of course, respond in a way that demonstrates diplomacy, tact, professionalism. You don't want to just go off and shriek and shout, hey, you're taking advantage of me and how dare you do that, because it may not at all have been something that they were knowingly doing that was going to upset you. So be prepared for it and respond in a calm and professional way. You may decide, you know what, in the interest of the relationship, you're willing to do it. Or it's really not any additional work for you, or it's so minimal, it's not really worth saying that this is something you don't wish to complete because it could cause more harm to the relationship than not. However, if you do decide you don't want to move forward with this particular element of this expanded project, what would you do? And here are some tips for you. You can always refer back to the contract and the original objectives that had been included and documented in the contract, which is obviously why it's so critical that you have that document and it is spelled out and it is agreed to by both parties so that you can reduce the chance that projects seem to just expand and grow without any kind of ending to them, without you getting more compensation either. You can certainly say, hey, if that's a high enough priority, I'm willing to swap out aspects of the original contract and replace with this component So you can change the contractual terms as long as you have something that you can trade in and out. So that if it's essentially the same level of work on your part, then no harm, no foul. You could do the new pieces of the project and don't do the originally agreed upon components as you replace the new for the old. You could simply say, hey, that's a great idea for a project. I can submit a proposal to you, and then we can see if we can move forward. Who do I send it to, or shall I send it to you, etc. Certainly, that's another approach that puts a very clear delineation between the current project and the new project. And if you do agree to take on the new work, are there things that the client says, I'm willing to swap out this for that because the new is of more consequence, importance, priority, etc. So that's why it's really critical that when it comes to scope creep, that we are prepared for it, even expect it, and then be pleasantly surprised if it never comes up. But at least you have something that you have already thought through as a response as to what you will accept, what you won't, and how you will choose to communicate that to your client. Now let's turn the tables. Are there times when the coach or the consultant will look for scope creep? And the answer is absolutely yes. In fact, I've had occasion to attend industry association meetings where coaches and consultants get together, and over appetizers and an adult beverage, I have heard consultants say that with a new client, they're always looking to sell the third job first. And when you look at them perplexed, well, what does that mean? They look for opportunities to nest inside the client. As they're completing the first project, they're looking for opportunities to expand and sell projects 2 and 3. So they'll quote or propose on a small aspect of what they see as a greater or larger project, and then build upon that by saying, the original contract won't achieve the stated objectives because we also need to address issues 2 and 3, 4, and 5 perhaps. So as a business practice, it's always easier to sell to an existing client or customer than it is to find the new customer. So be aware that your client may have a resistance to you selling the next project while you're still working on the current one. So that's going to require an element of being very ethical and being very professional and working collaboratively with your client or customer, and not try to appear as if you're pulling a fast one on them. So scope creep does happen from both sides, and you're very much aware now and advised that certainly you want to be of service to your customer or client, but you don't want to do work for no compensation, nor do you want to appear to be operating unethically by trying to sell something before the client or customer is really at a point when they are ready to address that. In your relationship, it will evolve and you will be able to identify other opportunities based on the good work you do on the current project. But trying to sell without demonstrating any competence is a road to being perceived simply as a slick salesperson who's not really trying to do what's best for your customer or client. So, as we've shared, coaches and consultants do know that it's always easier to sell to their current or existing client. By virtue of being the coach or consultant, you will have access to new opportunities, what I call here all the dark corners of the person or the organization. So you can leverage them, but leverage from a position of strength, not simply, okay, I'm inside the building, it's carpeted, it's climate controlled, I'm comfortable. You don't want to appear as if you're a squatter, but rather you're a business professional who is offering value. Demonstrate value, and then you can look for the additional or incremental projects. Don't always come across as looking for the projects that never end as you append one onto the next without ever delivering value. Now, the last bullet point that you see here, access to other decision makers who may have budget. In the course of your work with your original project owner, you may have opportunity to come across other people in that organization who may have needs as well. I would caution you, before you start selling to them, ask permission of your current project owner. You don't want to appear as if you are doing something behind his or her back, but rather use them to introduce you, to endorse, to make the introductions as appropriate so that you can do things ethically and not have to worry about there being any kind of negative consequence of your behaviors because you'll be perceived simply as going behind the back of your original project owner and selling something that did not have their permission to be pursued. So be careful with that. That concludes this module. We are getting close to the end of this training. We have a couple more modules to go through, one of which is my favorite, where we'll actually ask you to now do some consulting as it relates specifically to reaching an agreement. But we're going to hold off a little bit, give you a little time to digest what you've seen, and we'll quickly come to the next module where you'll have the opportunity to see how a real consulting project unfolds. See you there.